In the western part of Nigeria, in a quiet village surrounded by thick forest and red dusty roads, lived a young woman named Abeni. She was only 27 years old, yet life had already carved deep lines of struggle on her face. Abeni had two small children, Tond, who was 7, and little Sod, who had just turned 4. Since the death of her husband 3 years earlier, the burden of survival had rested completely on her shoulders. They lived in a small mud house at the edge of the village. The roof leaked whenever the rain fell, and the cracked walls allowed cold wind to creep inside at night. Many evenings, Abeni went to bed hungry so her children could eat the little food she managed to find. Every morning before the sun rose, Abeni would tie Sod to her back with a faded wrapper and hold Tond by the hand as they walked nearly 2 miles to the village river to fetch water. The water they fetched was not only for drinking but also for cooking and washing. The river was known as Odoain. The elders always warned children not to play too close to it. They said the river held mysteries older than the village itself. Some whispered that spirits lived beneath its calm surface. But Abeni had no time for stories. Survival did not allow space for fear. One evening, the sky was dark with thick clouds and the wind rustled the tall palm trees like restless spirits. Abeni realized she had forgotten to fetch water earlier in the day. Tond, she said softly, tying her wrapper firmly, stay inside and watch your sister. I will go to the river quickly. The boy nodded. Be careful, Mama. Abeni grabbed the empty clay pot and began walking toward the river path. The forest seemed unusually quiet that evening. Even the birds had stopped singing. As she walked, she suddenly heard something strange. A faint crying sound. At first, she thought it was the wind playing tricks on her ears. But as she moved closer to the riverbank, the sound became clearer. A child was crying. Abeni's heart began to pound. Who would leave a child near the river at this hour? She moved cautiously through the bushes until she reached the clearing beside the water. Then she froze. There, tied to a large iroko tree with a rough rope, was a small girl who looked no older than 5. Her long dark hair was wet and tangled, and tears streamed down her face. But something about her was strange. Her legs. They shimmered with scales like those of a fish. Abeni gasped softly. The child was not human. She was a mermaid. The girl looked up when she heard Abeni's footsteps. Please, help me, the child cried weakly. Abeni's mind raced. The elders' stories about river spirits rushed back into her memory. Some said helping such creatures could bring blessings. Others said it could bring terrible curses. But when Abeni looked at the child's trembling face, her heart softened. Whatever she was still a child. Who did this to you? Abeni whispered. Bad men, the girl sobbed. They want to sell me, they will come back. Abeni's chest tightened with fear. River hunters. Sometimes greedy men captured strange creatures from the river believing they could sell them for fortune in distant cities. If those men returned and saw her helping the child, she could be in terrible danger. The wind suddenly blew harder, and distant thunder roared across the sky. Abeni looked down the path nervously. The girl's cries grew desperate. Please, untie me. For a moment Abeni hesitated. Then she remembered her own children. What if Sod were tied somewhere crying and no one helped her? Without thinking further, Abeni rushed forward and began pulling at the thick rope. Her fingers trembled as she struggled to loosen the tight knots. Hurry, the girl whispered fearfully. At last the rope loosened and fell away. The mermaid collapsed into Abeni's arms. Can you walk? Abeni asked. The girl shook her head weakly. I am too tired. Abeni looked toward the dark forest path again. The air suddenly carried the distant sound of voices. Men's voices. They were returning. Panic shot through Abeni like lightning. Without wasting another second, she lifted the small mermaid onto her back, gripping her tightly. "Hold on," she whispered. Then she ran. Branches scratched her arms as she pushed through the forest path. The clay pot fell from her hands and shattered behind her, but she did not stop. Behind her, the voices grew louder. "Someone has been here. Find her." Ebony's heart nearly burst as she ran faster than she ever had in her life. The mermaid clung to her shoulders, trembling. Finally, after what felt like forever, the faint glow of the village lanterns appeared ahead. Ebony rushed into her small hut and shut the wooden door quickly.
Shh, it's all right. You're
Ton
safe
looked
now.
up in
Thank
surprise. "Mama." Ebony gently lowered the mermaid onto the mat. The children stared in shock. "Mama, what is she?" Ton whispered. "A child who needs help," Ebony said quietly. The little mermaid looked around the small hut with wide, curious eyes. Though the house was poor, it felt warm and safe. That night Ebony gave the girl the only food they had left, some boiled yam. The mermaid ate slowly and gratefully. "What is your name?" Ebony asked. "Yomoja," the child replied softly. Ebony's eyes widened. Among the Yoruba people, Yomoja was known as the powerful mother of waters. Could this child truly be connected to the spirits of the river? The thought sent chills down her spine. But the girl soon fell asleep beside Sod. For the next 2 days, Ebony hid the mermaid inside the hut. She dared not tell anyone in the village. Meanwhile, rumors spread quickly. Some villagers said strange hunters had been searching the forest angrily. Ebony knew the girl could not stay long. On the third night, the mermaid spoke. "I must return to the river," Yomoja said gently. Ebony nodded. "I know." Before dawn the next morning, Ebony wrapped the child carefully in cloth and carried her back to the river. Mist floated above the water like ghostly smoke. The river was silent. Ebony walked slowly to the edge and set the girl down. "Are you strong enough to swim?" she asked. Yomoja smiled. "Yes." But before entering the water, the child turned to Ebony. "You helped me when you were afraid." Ebony shook her head. "You are just a child." The mermaid stepped closer. "When my mother hears what you did, she will reward your kindness." Ebony smiled sadly. "I do not need reward. I only want my children to live." The mermaid touched Ebony's hand. "Your heart is pure." Then she slipped gently into the water. The river rippled softly, and she disappeared beneath the surface. For a moment Ebony stood there wondering if the entire thing had been a dream. Then the river began to glow. The water swirled and rose as if moved by an unseen force. From the shining water emerged a tall, majestic woman whose body shimmered like the ocean under sunlight. Ebony fell to her knees in fear. The woman's voice was calm and powerful. "I am the mother of the river." Ebony realized she was standing before the great spirit of the waters. "My daughter told me what you did," the spirit continued. "You risked your life to save her." Ebony trembled. "I only did what any mother would do." The spirit smiled. "Not everyone would." She raised her hand slowly. The river water suddenly moved toward the shore, forming a small mound beside Ebony's feet. "Dig," the spirit said. With shaking hands, Ebony pushed aside the wet sand. Her fingers struck something hard. She uncovered a clay pot. Inside it were shining gold coins and beautiful coral beads. Ebony gasped. "This will change your life," the spirit said gently. "But remember kindness, for wealth without compassion becomes a curse." Tears filled Ebony's eyes. "Thank you." When she looked up again, the river spirit had vanished. The water returned to its peaceful silence. From that day forward, Ebony's life changed forever. She used the treasure wisely, building a new house and sending her children to school. She helped the poor in her village and never forgot the night she saved a crying child tied to a tree. Years passed after the mysterious morning when Abani returned the little mermaid to the river and received the clay pot filled with gold coins. At first, the villagers were shocked by the sudden change in her life. The woman who once struggled to feed her children now owned a strong house made of cement blocks with a shiny zinc roof that glittered under the Nigerian sun. But Abani did something unusual with her wealth. Instead of showing pride, she remained humble. She repaired the village well so women no longer had to walk long distances every day. She paid school fees for poor children whose parents could not afford education. When old widows had nothing to eat, she quietly sent them bags of rice and beans. People began to call her Abani the Blessed. Yet deep inside her heart, Abani never forgot the promise the river spirit made. She knew the blessing came from the mother of the river, and such blessings were never given without purpose. One evening, nearly 10 years after that strange encounter, Abani sat outside her house watching the sunset. Ton was now 17, tall and strong like his late father, while Sod had grown into a bright and curious young girl of 14. The air smelled of roasting corn from nearby huts, and children's laughter filled the dusty village road. Suddenly, a cold wind passed through the compound. Abani frowned. The wind felt familiar, the same strange chill she had felt years ago at the river. At that moment, Sod ran toward her. "Mama," she called breathlessly. "Yes, my daughter. There is a girl outside asking for you." Abani looked surprised. "Who?" "She says you know her." Curious, Abani stood and walked to the gate. A young girl stood there. She looked about 15 years old, wearing a flowing blue dress that shimmered strangely under the fading sunlight. Her eyes were bright like moonlight on water. For a moment Abani could not recognize her. Then the girl smiled. "Abani," she said softly. The voice sent chills through Abani's body. It was the same voice she had heard years ago by the river. Her heart skipped. "Yomoja." The girl nodded slowly. "Yes. I have returned." Abani gasped and quickly pulled her inside before any neighbors could see. Her hands trembled with excitement and confusion. "You have grown so much," Abani whispered. The girl smiled gently. Time moves differently in the river world. Sod and Ton stared in amazement as Abani explained how she once saved the strange child from hunters near the river. The siblings listened with wide eyes. "You mean she is the mermaid?" Sod whispered. Yumoja laughed softly. "Yes, little sister." That night, Abani prepared a special meal of jollof rice and fried fish. They all sat together, talking and laughing as if they were old family members reunited after a long journey. But after the meal, Yumoja's expression grew serious. "I did not only come to visit," she said quietly. Abani felt a knot tighten in her chest. "What is wrong?" Yumoja looked toward the dark horizon. "Danger is coming to the river." The room fell silent. "Those hunters who tied me to the tree long ago, they never stopped searching." Abani felt a wave of dread. "Are they back?" Yumoja nodded. "They have grown richer and more powerful. They believe the river holds treasures beyond imagination. Now they have returned with weapons and machines to capture the spirits of the water." Ton clenched his fist. "That is evil. They plan to trap my mother," Yumoja continued softly. Abani's eyes widened in shock. "The mother of the river?" "Yes." The girl looked directly at Abani. "My mother says you are the only human she trusts." Abani felt overwhelmed. "What can I do?" Yumoja leaned forward. "The hunters believe the river spirits only appear when someone from the village performs a sacred calling at the water." Abani swallowed nervously. "They want to use someone as bait." Ton stood up angrily. "They cannot do that." But Yumoja continued calmly. "They have spies in nearby villages. Soon they will come here looking for the woman who was blessed by the river." Abani's heart pounded. That meant her. If they find you, Umoja said softly, they will force you to summon my mother. The room grew quiet. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Ebony slowly stood up. Her voice was steady. Then we must protect the river. Thorn and Sword looked at her in surprise. Mama, it is dangerous, Sword said. Ebony placed her hand gently on her daughter's shoulder. Kindness saved our lives once. Now we must protect the one who gave us that blessing. The next morning, Umoja led Ebony and Thorn to the river before sunrise. The mist floated across the water again, just like the day Ebony returned the little mermaid years ago. Umoja stepped into the shallow water. My mother will come soon, she said. Suddenly, the river began to glow. The water rose into swirling waves, and the majestic spirit appeared once again. The mother of the river looked as powerful and beautiful as ever. Ebony, she said warmly. Ebony bowed respectfully. My queen of the waters. The spirit looked toward the forest. The hunters are coming. At that moment, distant voices echoed through the trees. Men shouting. Dogs barking. They were already close. Fear rushed through Ebony's body. What should we do? She asked. The river spirit smiled calmly. Trust the river. The hunters burst through the bushes moments later. There were 6 of them, carrying nets, ropes, and strange metal traps. One of them pointed at Ebony. That is the woman. Another laughed greedily. The one blessed by the river. Capture her. They rushed forward. But suddenly the river exploded with roaring waves. Water rose like a living wall, knocking the hunters backward. Their traps were ripped from their hands and swallowed by the rushing current. The ground shook as the river surged across the shore. The men screamed in terror as the powerful waves chased them deep into the forest. Within seconds, they disappeared. The water slowly returned to its calm state. Silence filled the air. Ebony stood trembling, amazed by the incredible power she had just witnessed. The river spirit turned to her gently. You have protected the balance between the human world and the river world. She raised her hand once more. From the river rose 3 shining objects, a coral necklace, a golden bracelet, and a small wooden box. These are not only treasures, the spirit explained.
This is for you.
They are symbols of protection and wisdom.
Cherish it.
She handed the necklace to Sword. You will grow into a wise leader. She gave the bracelet to Thorn. You will become a protector of your people. Finally, she gave the wooden box to Ebony. Inside this box is something greater than gold. Ebony opened it slowly. Inside were small seeds. She looked confused. Seeds. The river spirit smiled. Plant them. Ebony followed the instruction. She planted the seeds on the fertile land beside her house. Within months, something miraculous happened. The land produced the richest cocoa trees the region had ever seen. Soon traders from faraway cities came to buy the harvest. Ebony's farm grew into one of the largest cocoa plantations in the region. Her family became not only wealthy but respected across many villages. Yet Ebony never forgot where the blessing came from. Every year, on the day she saved a crying child tied to a tree, she walked quietly to the river with her children. They would kneel beside the water and whisper their thanks to the unseen spirits beneath the surface. And sometimes, if the moonlight was bright and the river was calm, they could see a young mermaid swimming happily beneath the glowing water, watching over the woman who once chose kindness over fear.